Everyone laughs at Ed, calling him the starving expert. But this time, his meals couldn't be better. He caught a 99-pound wild deer in a trap, enjoyed a delicious grilled venison leg in the wilderness, wore a cozy little vest, stayed in a luxurious leaf-covered single room, and even had a jungle candlelight dinner. His life was more comfortable than a vacation. In the remote Carpathian mountains of Romania lies a primeval and ancient dense forest, home to thousands of brown bears and wolves. The production team chartered a helicopter for just 9.9 yuan and dropped Ed deep into the jungle. No food, no survival tools, not even any hair. Ed not only had to survive here for 10 days, but also live like royalty. Since nighttime temperatures here hover near freezing, Ed broke the rules by wearing shorts for the challenge. After a quick survey of his surroundings, he found the area lush and teeming with life. Thanks to his passive skills, he didn't need to worry about food for now. His top priority was finding water. The starving expert could go a week without food, but without water, he'd drop dead in 3 days. But the weather here changes in an instant. In less than half an hour, the sky turned gloomy, and thunderclaps echoed now and then. A bad start. He had to give up on finding water and focus on building shelter. Nighttime temperatures here drop by hundreds of degrees, and exposure to rain risks hypothermia. Luckily, there was a fallen spruce nearby. Ed broke branches and placed them on either side of the trunk, covering them with leaves. A crude shelter was done. He also found plenty of moss nearby, which was soft and perfect for a mattress, but it was all drenched by rain, so he gathered some and spread it out to dry in the open. With no water source yet, Ed was mildly dehydrated. Things got worse at night when he lay shivering on his rain-soaked wild carpet. He hoped exhaustion would put him to sleep, but ended up trembling for hours. The only way to stay warm was by doing push-ups. After daybreak the next morning, Ed set off downhill in search of water. Without a map or compass, he relied solely on years of wilderness survival experience. Along the way, he found a handful of exquisite wild blueberries, sour yet sweet, tasting absolutely delightful. After savoring the blueberries, he continued downhill until the soothing sound of flowing water reached his ears. There, before him, lay a wild stream. No filtration or boiling needed. He knelt down and drank his fill. The water was refreshingly sweet, clean, and safe. To make water access easier, Ed decided to set up camp nearby. He found a flat clearing, built a tripod frame with logs, covered the sides with branches, and filled gaps with leaves, a sturdy shelter that shielded him from wind and rain. To deter nighttime visitors, he needed to start a fire quickly. He gathered free dry grass for tinder and even found a dry bird's nest on his way back. With less than 2 hours before dark, time was tight. Using a sharp stone to drill, Ed added resin for friction, channeling unwavering determination into his efforts. In less than 2 minutes, sparks flew. He transferred them to the tinder with a breath, but the damp material refused to catch. A second attempt failed, prompting Ed to let out a string of curses. Refusing to sleep on the cold ground again, he launched a third effort. His practiced movements were heartbreakingly efficient this time. A flame flickered to life, only to die out once more. Now, he regretted not drying the tinder on rocks before building the shelter. On the third day, lessons learned, Ed spread fresh grass in the sun to dry. While waiting, he sought protein for energy. An unlucky butterfly crossing his path met an abrupt end. Ed plucked it from the air and swallowed it whole. Later, he spotted a plant called rhubarb dock, Rumex crispus, its roots rich in carbohydrates. Though bitter, it provided energy. He dug up a root, tasted it, then packed a few more as snacks. Back at the camp, the dried tinder crunched satisfyingly under his fingers. Without delay, he returned to work, and this time, success came effortlessly. A gentle breath ignited a roaring fire. Ed couldn't contain his laughter. He moved the flames to his shelter's entrance, roasting the rhubarb dock roots. Even cooked, they tasted bitter, and Ed knew overindulgence would spell trouble. But hunger clouded his judgment. He ate too much. Soon, his stomach churned violently. On the way to gather firewood, he had 3 bouts of diarrhea, leaving him utterly drained. A classic case of biting off more than he could chew. So on the 4th day, he planned to try his luck further away, to see if he could find something to improve his condition. Ed had just arrived at the valley when he heard the distant, melodious call of a deer. A deer ran past from the other side of the valley. Then Ed came up with a bold idea. If he could get a deer to nourish himself, that would be absolutely fantastic. Ed analyzed the fresh droppings and determined this was a path made by animals, so he decided to set up a snare trap here. He used a branch to make a pressure plate, a nearby sapling for the spring, and covered it with a layer of leaves for camouflage. As long as an animal stepped on it, it would be caught by the tightening snare. All that was left was to wait for prey to take the bait. After finishing this work, Ed was already starving. so he returned to the clearing where he had previously dried grass and set his sights on easily catchable grasshoppers. He caught 5 or 6 in one go, wiping out the entire family. He skewered them together on a branch and arranged them over the fire for charcoal grilling. A serving of grasshopper skewers, crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, was ready to eat. He took a bite. It was incredibly crispy with a chicken-like flavor, bursting with juice in his mouth. It was fragrant and soft. As for the nutrition, it was undoubtedly much higher, at least several dozen times that of beef. As a gentlemanly Englishman, a cup of tea after a meal is standard. He peeled off a large piece of spruce bark, used twigs and crushed charcoal as glue to seal the gaps, and a delicate little bowl was completed. He fetched some mountain spring water from the stream, placed scorching hot stones inside to boil the water, then added nettle leaves. After waiting for 2 minutes, a bowl of Wilderness brand nettle tea was ready to drink. Ed couldn't wait to take a small sip. My goodness, it tasted excellent. His face was filled with pure happiness. Early the next morning, Ed went to check the trap. Seeing what lay ahead, he looked utterly incredulous. My goodness, a young deer weighing 99 gin lay in the trap, unable to move. Ed was as happy as a child in his 40s. He picked up a wooden stick from the ground and slowly approached. Seeing the deer still clinging to life, he directly delivered a blow with the stick, sending it off to collect its final meal. Ed merrily carried the deer back to camp, worried that the smell might attract brown bears, and to prevent neighbors from coming over for a free meal, he carried the deer several kilometers downwind from the camp. He found a piece of fragile quartzite and smashed it against another rock. He picked a sharp piece to use as a cutting tool. With a few quick and skillful motions, he removed the deer's coat. Then, he butchered it into large pieces, according to different parts. Too impatient to wait, he directly grilled and ate the deer liver. He took a taste. Oh my God, crispy with a chicken-like flavor. The protein content is dozens of times that of beef. For the parts he couldn't finish, he planned to cook them using an underground oven. He dug a hole, filled the bottom with stones, then lit a blazing fire at the entrance. After the fire died down, he neatly arranged the deer legs inside, covered them with a layer of leaves, and finally buried them with sand and soil. Then he could quietly wait for the delicious meal to be ready. During this time, Ed wasn't idle either. To prevent the deer hide from shrinking, he made a tripod, then tied the hide onto it to air dry and set its shape. After finishing this work, the long-awaited feast was also cooked. Not minding that it was scalding hot, he picked up a leg and started gnawing on it directly. It wasn't tough or too lean. The saltiness was just right. With one bite, it was full of the flavor of a wood fire. Ed praised it as he ate, saying it was countless times better than beef. He couldn't stop gnawing on it. From this point on, Ed officially declared that he was living a royal standard life. The following days, Ed spent his time by the fire, gnawing on venison legs, living a life of unparalleled comfort. Soon, the challenge reached its 9th day. After 2 days of air drying, the deer hide had set. Ed removed any meat scraps, cut a hole in it with a stone knife, and slipped it on instantly, elevating his style and appearance. As his departure drew near, Ed wanted to make the final dinner special. He raided the grass for grasshoppers again, picked some blueberries, and gathered free sorrel leaves, but he felt something was missing. True refinement required ambiance. He wrapped birch bark around pine branches to make a small candle. When night fell, Ed lit the candle, wearing his bold little vest, and enjoyed a candlelit dinner. He started with sorrel salad as an appetizer, then spread blueberries on the venison. The first bite was explosive. Ed couldn't stop eating. After finishing, he tossed the remaining blueberries into his mouth as dessert. A perfect meal concluded, and he slept soundly until morning. On the day the challenge ended, Ed packed his belongings, bid farewell to his shelter, and successfully completed the mission. The Nordland Mountains of Norway, just over 100 kilometers from the Arctic Circle, feature brutal conditions nearly identical to the Arctic's. To avoid freezing solid, Ed wore a down jacket for the first time ever. The production team chartered a helicopter for 9.9 yuan and dropped Ed on a mountain peak. No food, no survival tools, not even any hair. The starving expert not only had to survive, but also live like royalty. From a high vantage point, Ed guessed resources would be more abundant near the tree line at the mountain's base. He shouldered his pack and strode downhill with an air of confidence, only for the uneven snowdrifts to throw him off balance. One misstep sent him face first into the snow, severely slowing progress. Undeterred, he sat down and slid like a makeshift skier. My goodness, a bald head truly thinks better. This saved him a ton of energy. Soon, he reached the snow line. After hours of grueling trekking, Ed felt dehydrated. Even so, he dared not eat snow. It would cause mouth ulcers and burn precious calories. Instead, he found waterlogged moss, squeezed it for drinkable liquid, and found it refreshingly sweet. with a grassy flavor. With water secured, he turned to warmth for the night. On trees he spotted dry, old man's beard, usnea lichen, perfect fire-starter material, and gathered it quickly. With less than an hour before dark, and no suitable dry tinder in sight, Ed accepted that no fire would burn tonight. To ensure tomorrow's success, he stuffed grass into his crotch as a human dehumidifier, then found a relatively dry spot to sleep. As temperatures plummeted at night, Ed shivered while counting sheep. The icy ground offered no rest, so he could only do push-ups to stay warm, enduring another sleepless night. On the second day, he didn't want to endure another sleepless night like that. He had to find a place to set up camp as soon as possible. Trekking forward along a small stream, he found a tidal bay. This spot, nestled between mountains and water, was perfectly suited for making camp. Worried about being submerged by the rising tide, he located a high area away from the tidal zone. Then he pulled out the dry grass he had carefully kept overnight. By the sound, it had become very crisp. It seemed the drying method had worked well. He went to find more materials for starting a fire. In such a damp environment, the hand drill method was clearly not feasible. He had to find another way. This red stone was rich in iron oxide. Perhaps he could use it to make fire. But having just the stone wasn't enough. After wandering around a bit, he found an iron rod. This way, he could strike the two together to produce sparks. No sooner said than done. Ed found an ideal spot and sat down. Unlike the hand drill method, this required patience, precision, and skill none could be lacking. After more than 2 hours of clinking and clanking, perseverance paid off. Finally, sparks appeared. He placed them onto the tinder and gave a gentle blow. Ed successfully ignited a flame. Before it got dark, Ed planned to build himself a raised bed. He definitely didn't want to sleep on the cold ground again tonight. Lacking proper tools, he had to make do with dead, dry trees. He used the fire to control the length of the wood. He laid down soft juniper branches, and a wilderness Simmons mattress was ready. With the fire for company tonight, Ed could finally get a good night's sleep. Waking up the next day, Ed was already ravenous. Seeing that he was about to trigger the 3 days, 9 missed meals passive state, he decided to put aside building the shelter and go out first to find some food to fill his stomach. Perhaps he was lightheaded from hunger, because he actually mistook water droplets under the ice for tadpoles. Continuing deeper into the jungle, he found many ferns growing on the rock walls. The roots of these plants are rich in carbohydrates. He picked some to try. One bite, crunchy, with a licorice flavor. The carbohydrate content is dozens of times that of beef. After replenishing his energy, Ed prepared to return to camp. The scene before him left him stunned. A sudden surge of tidewater almost extinguished his fire. Fortunately, the campsite was chosen high enough, but the moss beneath the fire had soaked up a lot of water. If he left it like that, not only would it reduce the heat, but it would also increase fuel consumption. So Ed temporarily moved the fire, cleared away the waterlogged moss, and built a fire directly on the bare rock. This ensured the flames kept burning, and only then did Ed feel settled. After finishing these tasks, Ed went back into the woods to search for materials. He intended to finish with hot stones. The first sip sent flavors skyrocketing, just as his pickup truck arrived, marking the challenge's triumphant end. The Mongolian Gobi's harsh environment, one of the world's largest deserts, is nearly lifeless. Undeterred, Ed launched his challenge there, dropped off by the production team's truck. No food, no tools, not even hair. Temperatures near 40 degrees Celsius made finding water critical. Without a map or compass, Ed relied on experience, trekking toward distant mountains for fresh water. The scorching heat drained a liter of water from him hourly. To avoid dehydration, he checked his internal faucet, a metaphor for his stamina. The color wasn't too dark, so he pressed on. After 2 hours, he found wild donkey juice, plants, likely succulents, their moisture a temporary relief. Barefoot walking risked injury, so Ed crafted sandals from his belt straps, easing his journey. Yet despite scaling dunes, only endless sand met his eyes. No water, no hope. As night fell, he resigned to sleeping on the cold ground, grumbling, "This isn't the happiness I signed up for." On the second day, Ed set out early before the heat intensified, shouldering his heavy pack toward the mountain summit. Upon cresting the ridge, a splash of green met his eyes, the desert oasis he'd longed for. The darker hues at its center unmistakably hinted at water. But on his descent, he found a camel carcass, a troubling sign of nearby Gobi bears. Picking up a bone as a makeshift weapon, he reached the oasis and discovered a clear waterhole. His joy bordered on the absurd as he let out a whoop, dropping to drink greedily. The water tasted sweet, its hydrating power, dozens of times, beefs until he realized the hole had been dug by someone, chilling him to the core. To avoid sunburn, He smeared mud on his exposed skin, his bald head included, and pitched camp behind a sun-shielded rock. Come nightfall, he gathered dry kindling and reverted to his old trade, hand-drilling fire starting. Sparks flared in minutes, and with a breath, a crackling bonfire roared to life. That night, he slept soundly by the flames. Daybreak on day 3 found him famished, his 3 fasts, 9 missed meals, passive skill had activated repeatedly. Scouting for protein, he spotted a rodent warren. Blocking 2 entrances with rocks, he smoked out the tunnels only to find them empty after hours of digging. Defeated, he returned to the oasis, where fortune smiled. He found sorrel syrup, grass carbrich, licorice sweet roots, a rusted can for tea making, and a blackberry bush, a bear's favorite. Devouring handfuls, he declared them better than flying in flavor. Post-meal, he brewed a berry herb infusion, its flavor soaring to the crown of his head. Refreshed, he transformed his shelter into a wild mansion with stacked stones, only to realize his caloric deficit had grown. A Pyrrhic victory, at best. On the 5th day, famished, Ed began searching for protein under rocks. Within minutes, he caught a small lizard. Once he mastered the technique, he rounded up the lizard's entire extended family. Back at camp, he skewered them on sticks and charred them over the fire. Half an hour later, a fragrant meal was ready. One bite, crispy with a chicken-like flavor, its protein content to dozens of times beefs. After this minuscule feast, Ed strolled to aid digestion only to spot a hedgehog. He couldn't believe his luck, dispatching it with a stone. To cook this delicate creature, he dug a pit, lined it with rocks, lit a fire at the entrance, and buried the hedgehog in embers. 4 hours later, the result was, my goodness, fall-apart tender, the shell peeling away effortlessly. The meat was juicy, succulent, and nutritionally light years ahead of beef, though he regretted forgetting cumin. A week passed, as Ed refined his shelter into a wild mansion, now both sturdy and aesthetically pleasing. To prove long-term survival was possible, he targeted rodents again. Blocking a dried riverbed's tunnels with rocks, he smoked them out while using the downtime to upgrade his shelter with a roof of branches. To his delight, the trap yielded 3 mice. Cooking them as he'd done the hedgehog, he produced authentic roasted field mice, crispier than chips. He devoured them ravenously, capping the meal with wild fruit. With his belly full, Ed declared his life royal. The next day, bidding his shelter farewell, he completed the challenge triumphantly. Patagonia, Argentina, located at the southern tip of South America, is one of the last great wildernesses on Earth. The environment here is harsh, barren, and sparsely populated. With the production team's meticulous arrangements, a helicopter was chartered to drop Ed off at the challenge location. Stripping off his shirt and sandals, Ed crouched beside the helicopter as the powerful engine roared like a giant fan, styling his tousled hair into a windswept look. As the pilot, Tony, flew away, the lizard, Ed's nickname for his hair, couldn't stop complimenting the craftsmanship. Calming his surging adrenaline, Ed quickly formulated a plan. In the past, searching for water would have been his top priority, but here, he had no such worries. Endless mountain streams, fed by melting snow from distant peaks, offered cool, sweet water. Nighttime temperatures here plummeted below freezing, so Ed urgently needed to set up shelter. The nearby forest seemed ideal, but Ed soon discovered a bonus. The ground was covered with sorrel plants, rich in vitamins and iron. Ed never missed a chance to replenish calories. Nearby, golden brown berries, likely Empetrum nigrum, also grew, prompting Ed to lie back and enjoy a wild salad. Unfortunately, swarms of ants forced him to abandon the forest campsite. He chose a sandy area, instead flat, dry, and soft, with shrubs shielding him from wind and rain. Gathering dry materials, Ed used stones as cutting tools and collected moss for tinder. Falling back on his old trade, he worked furiously, finally coaxing sparks from the fire drill. A gentle blow transferred them to the tinder, igniting a roaring flame. Overnight, temperatures dropped by dozens of degrees, leaving Ed no choice but to sleep by the fire. The next morning, his backpack was dusted with frost-proof temperatures had dipped below 0. Thankfully, the fire ensured his survival. While gathering materials for a proper shelter, Ed spotted trout in a river. For 3 hours, he waited. For safety, he requested an airdrop from the production team. The package contained a shirt. Ed slipped it on, instantly upping his style and efficiency. With renewed vigor, he built a sturdy shelter framework, topped it with reeds, and soon had a wind and rainproof haven. As night fell, he lay inside, warm and comfortable. The next morning, Ed woke up early, impressed by his own handsomeness. Now, with shelter, water, and fire, the only remaining challenge was food. He returned to the forest where he'd eaten salad earlier and found a deer skeleton. The bone made an excellent digging tool. and the tendons from the deer's legs could be woven into fishing line. Ed packed it all up. On his way back, Ed spotted a group of tadpoles searching for their mother. To others, they were just tadpoles, but to Ed, they were precious protein. He caught one and popped it into his mouth. My goodness, it tasted like crap. But then Ed had a brainwave. Why not try grilling some? He gathered 30 tadpoles, arranged them neatly on his shoulder blade, and roasted them over the fire. Half an hour later, a dish of charred on the outside, tender on the inside, grilled tadpoles was ready. Ed grabbed one and took a bite. My goodness, it tasted just as awful as before, but for survival's sake, he forced himself to finish them. By day 4, Ed soaked the leg bone in the stream for 2 hours to soften the tendons. After removing them, he pounded the fibers apart with wood, then braided them into fishing line. He fashioned a hook from thorns and headed to the river to fish, but after 3 hours, he'd caught nothing. Disheartened, he returned to camp. The next few days brought no sunshine, so Ed shed his ragged shirt, feeling unshackled. He tried fishing again, with the same result. Days without protein intake were unsustainable. Braving the cold wind, he went foraging and struck gold, a cluster of sour-sweet blueberries and wild strawberries nearby. But Ed wasn't satisfied with vegetarian fare. He set his sights on trout again. Yet the icy meltwater was unbearable. He couldn't last 2 minutes before retreating to the fire, practically hugging it for warmth. A string of failures made Ed realize he needed a better plan. He finally remembered fish traps. Carving 2 7-shaped hooks from stone, he linked them with a branch spring mechanism, added bait, and set up 3 traps. Now, all he could do was wait for some unsuspecting fish to take the bait. On the 9th day of the challenge, Ed went to check his fishing traps. From a distance, he could see the hooks raised high, though it was a small fish. Ed was thrilled. With tomorrow marking his return, he decided to prepare a hearty meal to replenish his nutrients. Drawing lessons from his previous failure, Ed relaxed his body. With a swift move, his family-style grappling technique, he caught a small river trout. Unable to contain himself, he let out a whoop of laughter. When luck strikes, there's no stopping it. Another fish fell victim to his skill. To keep each fish fresh, Ed built a temporary fish pond to store them. But fortune favored the bold in a moment's carelessness. One escaped into a larger pool, infuriating Ed. In a fit of frustration, he swatted at the water wildly. But after hours of effort, the large trout still eluded him. Resigned, he returned to camp with the remaining 4 fish, charring them over the fire. He gathered berries and sorrel leaves, arranging them into an elegant presentation. After enduring hunger for so long, Ed finally enjoyed his first proper meal of the challenge. Without further ado, he dug in. The fish was tender and fragrant, all meat except for the bones. Its nutritional value dozens of times that of beef. Sated, Ed sat by the creek, admiring the sunset. The next day, as his departure arrived, the once muddy waters had cleared, revealing the large fish he'd always dreamed of, but now, Ed no longer needed them. As the helicopter approached, he smoothly concluded this chapter of the challenge. Not only would it reduce the heat, but it would also increase fuel consumption. So Ed temporarily moved the fire, cleared away the waterlogged moss, and built a fire directly on the bare rock. This ensured the flames kept burning, and only then did Ed feel settled. After finishing these tasks, Ed went back into the woods to search for materials. He intended to finish building the shelter today. He planned to build a sloped roof, infused with hot stones. The first sip sent flavors skyrocketing, just as his pickup truck arrived, marking the challenge's triumphant end. The Mongolian Gobi's harsh environment, one of the world's largest deserts, is nearly lifeless. Undeterred, Ed launched his challenge there, dropped off by the production team's truck. No food, no tools, not even hair. Temperatures near 40 degrees Celsius made finding water critical. Without a map or compass, Ed relied on experience, trekking toward distant mountains for fresh water. The scorching heat drained a liter of water from him hourly. To avoid dehydration, he checked his internal faucet, a metaphor for his stamina. The color wasn't too dark, so he pressed on. After 2 hours, he found wild donkey juice, plants, likely succulents, their moisture a temporary relief. Barefoot walking risked injury, so Ed crafted sandals.
3 hours.